Debate, the Honourable Member for West Vancouver, Sunshine Coast, Sea to Sky Country.
Madam Speaker, I rise today to offer a few thoughts on Bill C-42, which proposes amendments to the Canada Business Corporations Act, or CBCA, and makes consequential changes to other statutes to create a federal beneficial ownership registry. This registry will be arguably the most important tool we can utilize to better detect, deter, and prosecute money laundering, tax evasion, fraud, and terrorist financing activities. First of all, let me congratulate all members of the Standing Committee on Industry and Technology for their hard work. They studied a bill with more than 28 clauses dealing with a highly complex subject matter and heard from numerous stakeholders who represent a spectrum of views. Amongst other factors, the committee heard that the interoperability of the registry is a key concern and is, in fact, a key ingredient to the success of a pan-Canadian beneficial ownership registry. And certain witnesses appearing before committee emphasized the need to ensure adequate alignment both domestically and internationally. And the need for this is obvious given the transnational nature of organized crime and the complexity and sophistication with which actors can conceal the true owners of different assets. And we need to be able to work together to counter this. Interoperability has many dimensions, but it generally means that Canada not only respects international best practices on thresholds and uses the best available data standard, but that Canada is similarly aligned with domestic best practices so that provinces are enticed to join a pan-Canadian registry, and so that information can seamlessly be shared to trace illicit activities across jurisdictions. And that's why Canada has adopted the Beneficial Ownership Open Data Standard, which is an internationally accepted open standard for modeling and publishing information on the beneficial ownership and control of companies. It is used for collecting, sharing, and using data on beneficial ownership. And Canada's use of the standard will ensure that our registry can communicate and speak with the same technical language as beneficial ownership registries around the world, as well as with our provincial and territorial partners. The standard will also mandate corporations to provide information about the individuals who have significant ownership stakes and control in any corporation, thereby empowering law enforcement, the CRA, banks, journalists, and the general public to accurately ascertain the true owners of any given company. And this will help prevent criminals from using anonymous numbered corporations or shell companies, which are sometimes spread across multiple jurisdictions as a shield to conceal the true owners of companies. And furthermore, I do want to highlight the work of the committee in increasing the maximum penalties for those that are found to fail to comply with the legislation, with fines now of up to $1 million to ensure that there is a sufficient deterrent effect to individuals frustrating the important purpose of the legislation. And Madam Speaker, the provinces and territories have a major role to play here because the vast majority of companies are in fact incorporated provincially. And that is why I'm pleased to see my home province of British Columbia taking a leadership role in response to widespread allegations of money laundering in the province. BC has tabled legislation to create their own beneficial ownership registry for corporations and has already created a beneficial land ownership registry, which is now in effect. And it is easy to see why action is important. A 2018 report estimated that money laundering has played a role in increasing housing prices by approximately 5% in British Columbia. And the lack of knowledge regarding the true owners of over half of the top 100 most expensive properties in BC not only worsens the problem of housing affordability, but further raises concerns about potential tax evasion related to the treatment of principal residences. And furthermore, clear ties have been made in between money laundering and the devastating health crisis we're facing in BC, the opioid epidemic, where illicit funds garnered from the sale of fentanyl and other illegal drugs are laundered through real estate and other opaque means and contribute to the problem. And that's why, in addition to Canada's adoption of the Beneficial Ownership Open Data Standard, the federal government has and continues to work alongside its provincial and territorial counterparts to continue to move the needle ahead in ensuring beneficial ownership transparency in Canada. This collaboration began at the officials level in 2016 and was formalized in a 2017 agreement between federal, provincial, and territorial finance ministers who agreed in principle to pursue legislative amendments to their respective corporate statutes to require corporations to hold accurate and up-to-date information on beneficial owners, as well as to eliminate the use of bearer shares. In 2019, finance ministers further agreed to cooperate on initiating consultations on making beneficial ownership information more transparent through initiatives such as aligning access to public registries while respecting jurisdictional responsibilities with respect to corporations. The ongoing collaboration has resulted in, amongst other things, the majority of the provinces making amendments to their corporate statutes to create and maintain a beneficial ownership registry of their individuals with significant control. And these amendments largely emulate the 2019 legislative amendments made to the CBCA. And this means that for most businesses operating in Canada, there will be information available on their beneficial owners. Our ongoing collaboration with the provinces has also culminated in the establishment of a common platform called the Multi-Registry Access Services, or MRAS for short. MRAS is a common front-end portal that provides access to all of the corporate registries in the country. It was a project adopted between the provinces, territories, and the federal government many years ago and represents one of the options to build on in creating a pan-Canadian registry. Madam Speaker, our efforts to harmonize federal and provincial beneficial ownership regimes are an ongoing initiative. To illustrate, it is notable that on June 5th of this year, Minister Champagne and Deputy Prime Minister Freeland sent a joint letter to their respective provincial and territorial ministerial counterparts, asking them to once again join the federal government's effort to create a pan-Canadian beneficial ownership registry and seeking specifically to understand each jurisdiction.
Je dois interrompre l'honorable député.
I must interrupt the honourable member. With all due respect, House procedures have it that we do not name ministers by name, but by their role. I couldn't agree more. I was distracted. The member is absolutely right. We do not name members.
And seeking to specifically understand each jurisdiction's particular needs and any supports required to facilitate their participation in a pan-Canadian system. During the committee hearings, requests were heard to lower the ownership threshold to disclosure from 25% to 10%. First, Madam Speaker, it's important to point out that the decision to adopt a 25% threshold was done in 2018, and it was approved by Parliament in 2019 in Bill C-86. With that said, the government does not support lowering the ownership threshold to 25% to 10%, because to do so would introduce significant interoperability issues. The 25% threshold makes the most sense for the following reasons. The 25% threshold is in line with the Proceeds of Crime and Terrorist Financing Act, Canada's anti-money laundering and anti-terrorism financing legislation. It also aligns with the beneficial ownership thresholds put in place by Canadian provinces, including Quebec and British Columbia. And it's also in line with the ownership threshold adopted in all major jurisdictions in the world, including the US, the UK, the European Union, and Japan. And finally, it's compliant with the G20 and the norms set by the G20's Financial Action Task Force. And it should be emphasized that lowering the ownership threshold is not necessary to uncover significant control, since those individuals who have a right to or actually exercise significant influence or control over a company are still required to be registered, even if they own less than 25% of the shares. And Madam Speaker, to ensure the effectiveness of this new registry, it is crucial that Canada stays in line with domestic and international norms. Otherwise, the data that it collects would not be interoperable and comparable, which would create both a significant burden on businesses and a significant challenge in ensuring compliance. Lowering the ownership threshold from 25% to 10% will take us out of alignment with best practices both domestically and internationally, and therefore it's not recommended by the government. Madam Speaker, the lack of a beneficial ownership transparency is impairing Canada's ability to combat serious financial crimes like fraud, money laundering, and tax evasion. It also limits our capacity to enforce domestic and international sanctions and to effectively trace and freeze financial assets. And finally, it is impacting the trust of Canadians and foreign investors in our marketplace. Our inability to quickly and quietly identify a company's beneficial owner delays criminal investigations, denies law enforcement, leads to potential suspects, witnesses, and evidence, and impairs the identification and seizure of suspected proceeds of crime. And it also reduces the ability of private businesses to protect themselves. It is clear that the registry proposed by this bill and the interoperability measures that form part of this regime would significantly improve Canada's ability to fight financial crime. It would help public authorities verify owners across corporate layers, help businesses better validate the identity of their trading partners, and render more difficult the use of corporations for illicit activities. Future areas that should be examined to improve our ability to ascertain the beneficial owners of assets include bringing in new requirements for foreign companies doing business in Canada to disclose their beneficial owners, as well as for the Government of Canada to play a coordinating role in assisting the provinces and territories to establish a pan-Canadian land ownership registry that would be able to work in concert with the corporate beneficial ownership registry. and it would dovetail the important legislative changes to improve our ability to tackle financial crime announced in this year's Budget Implementation Act. And a forthcoming review of the Proceeds of Crime and Terrorist Financing Act will surely identify future measures to take. With that, Madam Speaker, I see my time is running out, so I hope all members of this House will join me in supporting this important bill's passage so we can continue to improve our ability to protect Canada from financial crime and illicit activities that it supports.